Another area that you often see used as quote-unquote scientific support for things like mind-matter interaction, especially in the popular literature, which is why I'm choosing it as one of the ones to cover, is quantum mechanics and quantum physics. Now, there are a very small number of people that have been educated in quantum physics and quantum mechanics that basically talk about this in the context of something like mind-matter interaction and do use it to justify it. And I think because of that small handful of people, it's become such a powerful argument for generating belief around the idea of mind-matter interaction being able to be used to affect things on a very, very broad scale. And by that I mean, you know, going out and visualizing and getting the new house or whatever. Well, in my PhD program, one of the reasons that I chose mind-matter interaction was because two of the major synchronicity scholars were members of the program. So Alan Combs and F. David Peat were both members of the faculty for this PhD program. And I knew that I was going to be in classes with them, and I've been in classes with them, and I've, you know, been teaching assistant for them, etc. They're really very powerful thinkers, but David Peat is actually the real deal in terms of quantum mechanics. Alan Combs is a psychologist, very, very well-known consciousness theorist. David Peat is a quantum physicist. So you can see a couple of his former positions here. I'm just putting a couple of things on the graphic here for you. So former chairman, Division of Theoretical Physics, for instance, Canadian Institute of Physics, former research scientist, National Research Council of Canada. In other words, he was a working bench physicist. Now, there's kind of a joke in the physics community that young physicists experiment and old physicists theorize. That's exactly what happened over the course of David's career. He went from being basically a bench physicist, an actual working quantum physicist, to more of a theorist. You can see that he's not a lightweight person. He's published in very, very major journals, and I've only included a small section of them here. Nature, of course, even in the public, you should have heard of the journal Nature. I mean, that's just used so often as a gold standard on the news and things like that. And he worked with some other very, very famous quantum physicists, including David Bohm. And in fact, this is what makes David Peat such a powerful example to use when talking about things like the law of attraction, the secret of mind-matter interaction, because David Bohm's theories are often the ones that are used by people who are trying to advocate for this notion that quantum mechanics supports the idea of the secret and the law of attraction and new thought. Well, here you have David Peat, someone who has written books with David Bohm, someone that has worked and collaborated with David Bohm. David Bohm, of course, has passed on, but David Peat is now a very senior physicist, currently living and running a center in Italy. Roger Penrose is another very, very, very major quantum physicist and quantum theorist. The second person on this graphic is Henry Stapp. Henry Stapp is still a working physicist. He works at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, which is basically the laboratory kind of on the hill above Berkeley University in California. Very distinguished career, very, very, very well-known quantum theorist. PhD supervised by a couple of Nobel laureates. He later went on to work with Pauli and Heisenberg, who are basically a couple of the founders of quantum mechanics. All right, so you have on this graphic two very, very, very major quantum theorists, and interestingly, two people that are very much at opposite ends of the quantum theory spectrum. One of the things that I think is often presented erroneously to the public about quantum mechanics is that it's sort of the settled area of science. This is a very hotly contested, very heavily worked in area of the sciences. Within that, you actually have two separate groups of people. So you have people that are really working scientists that they go and they learn quantum theory and they just keep applying it. They never really think deeply about the underlying theory. And that's most quantum physicists. Most quantum physicists are working physicists, and they don't delve deeply into the underlying theoretical underpinnings of quantum mechanics itself. The David Peates and the Henry Staffs of the world are very unusual, but they are not only people who have been or are still currently very, very involved in the bench science of quantum mechanics, but they've also spent most of their lives thinking about the underlying theory and why these equations work the way they work. I think that's one of the issues that you have with, as I mentioned, you have sort of this handful of people that are out there advocating law of attraction and the secret and whatnot as being within the realm of quantum theory. That's really nice, but none of them are on the caliber and scale of a David Peate or a Henry Staff in terms of the respect that they have for the theoretical work that they've done and just how they've just really spent their lifetimes within quantum mechanics trying to understand the deeper theories. So there's only a handful of people that you can go to like this in the quantum world. And that, fortunately, I've had interactions with both of them. So, I've actually been able to put the question directly to them. And with David Peate, I was able to actually do it in a learning environment. With Henry Staff, I was able to do it sort of separately. And I've been asked to, and I've reviewed, for instance, one of Henry's books on this topic. So I'm not considered unknowledgeable of it myself, even though I'm certainly not a quantum mechanics person, and I'm not a quantum physicist by any stretch of the imagination. But nonetheless, for a major consciousness publication, I was asked to do a review with Alan Combs of Henry Staff's book. And so I sent that review to Henry, and I said, Henry, is there anything in here that I've misunderstood from your theories on this? And I used that interaction basically to get some of my other questions answered. So here's the story. Neither of these gentlemen, despite the fact that they are on opposite ends of the theoretical spectrum within quantum mechanics, believe that there is any support at all in quantum mechanics for notions of mind-matter interaction as presented publicly in things like New Thought, or the law of attraction, or the secret. And it really is that simple. I can't say it any more simply than that. When you go and you read a book tonight or tomorrow, or you think back to the books that you've read in the past, and they were going on and on and on and on about how there's all this theoretical support in quantum mechanics for things like mind-matter interaction. Here you have two of the leading theorists on opposite ends. They're arguing against each other all the time. They're on opposite ends of the theoretical spectrum. Both of them, and I could incidentally put in a few others. These aren't the only two major theorists that I've put this question to. I've really tried to find anyone who's a major, highly respected theorist that I could go to, that I could say, hey, listen, is there any support for this? And have them say yes. And not one of them has been able to affirm it. In fact, they've all basically said, this is a huge misunderstanding. We understand how the lay public can misinterpret things like this, because we, of course, have to come up with these metaphors, and it looks like, there's this injection of thought, and from that you have reality collapsing down, but that's just simply not what the equations say. So this is another one that I want you to set aside, right? If you've read the books and seen the material, and you've heard all these people talking about how science, and usually when they're talking about science, they're talking about quantum mechanics supports the notion of mind-matter interaction, supports the idea that you can wish yourself into a new house. These are the leading, major, very authoritative sources. I can't find one of them that supports that idea.